This video device is called the slider. Makes sense we're talking about the Lions. Matt Millen inherited a team in 2009-7. Since then, no team since has a worse record. The Lions have had the same number of wins as the Texans in this span, although it should be pointed out, the Texans didn't play in the NFL until 2002. Things have not gone well for Detroit. Ladies and gentlemen, you've got Mel. Mel Kiper Jr. back with us. Mel, they sit there at number 2. You and everybody else thinks wideout Calvin Johnson of Georgia Tech, best player in the draft. Can Detroit, though, considering they've taken wideouts 3 out of the last 4 years in the first round, go there again?
You don't think they probably will, based on what information that you hear over the last couple of months, Trey. You look at it, the trade they made with Denver, the pickups they made in free agency, maybe preclude them from taking some of the best players in this draft. Adrian Peterson sitting right there. Well, you had Tatum Bell coming over to Denver. You signed T.J. Duckett. You brought in George Foster. Can't take Joe Thomas. Well, we had Joey Harrington. Didn't work out. You know, Mike Martz has developed quarterbacks like Mark Bolger and Kurt Warner, so we can maybe wait a bit on a quarterback, maybe Trent Edwards from Stanford early in round 2, and not take Brady Quinn. So all these reasons why you maybe move off of 2, look at Gaines Adams, which will give you a very formidable defensive front, a lot of money tied up with those defensive linemen, but that may be the route. Trade off of 2. I'd say you better come away with a quarterback. You're passing on Brady Quinn and be a great face of this organization. They better hit on a quarterback in this draft if they do pass on Brady Quinn, and hope that if it is Trent Edwards, he's the right guy.
Well, they've got a lot of things they've got to deal with from an organizational standpoint. Floyd, if you're the GM of this team, and as good as you think Calvin Johnson is, and everyone thinks he's going to be great, can you sell to your ticket base? You know, those first 3 times we didn't mean it, but this time, this is going to be the guy.
Fourth time's a charm. I think what you would sell is that he is the best player in this draft. The best player in the country, and I think they would buy that. Now, I can see why they wouldn't do that. I agree with Mel from the standpoint, at some point in time, they have got to come out with a quarterback. If it's not this year, they're going to be sitting here next year saying the same stuff. If they're going to take Gaines Adams, who is a great player, trade down. You can drop a few slots, still get him, and pick up the extra choice.
I love the philosophy of best player available when you've got a good team. Yeah. But when you've got holes to fill on the offensive line, defensive line, linebacking core, when you've got a quarterback you need, you can't take best player available. You better take best player available at a position of need.
Yeah, I mean, at some point you have to do something else besides wide receiver every year.
You have the opportunity to get the best player in the draft. You go out, you get him. You have to be diligent in what you're doing. You have to follow your plan. You can't get caught up into what everyone else is saying about your team. That's the problem in Detroit. He's worrying too much about what everyone else is trying to think. You have to go out. The best player in the draft is available. You go and get him, and you match up 2 great receivers that help your quarterback. In the second round, you do like Mel's talking about. You go out and get your quarterback, and then you start from there.
Well, that's one of the problems. They got lots of problems. Yeah. Okay, we've established that with the loss of 6 straight years, at least 10. Let's go back to Len Pasquarelli here. Len, real question for you. You heard Floyd talk about it, maybe trade out of the 2. How much interest is there from other teams to jump into that 2 spot and trade with the Lions?
Well, there's a lot of interest, Trey. You know, they've done everything but put out a neon sign that this pick is for sale, particularly if Calvin Johnson is there. And I've heard reports that they've talked to 8 teams. I've verified 5 teams that have had legitimate conversations with Detroit, even though it's still very early. But I think this, if you're Matt Millen, you can't let history dictate what you do with that choice. So you can't just sit there and say, well, I've taken 3 wide receivers, only hit on one of them, Roy Williams. I can't take another wide receiver. If you believe Calvin Johnson is the top player in this draft, I think you have to be awful tempted to take him.
All right, well, let's go back to Floyd here. Floyd, who do you think is most likely to jump up there and make that deal?
Well, I mean, I don't know, but you look at a team like Tampa, it would be a natural.
They're dying to get there.
They want the receiver. They can swap spots, you know, throw in a draft choice or a player down the line. Everybody's happy. Both teams get the players they want, and Detroit gets a little kicker.
I think if you're Detroit, though, you've got to look at yourself and you say, okay, if we take Calvin Johnson, does that take us to, you know, beyond 6 and 10 to 5? You know, I don't think so. So I think it's about compiling some draft picks and building your team, because the whole core of that team is weak.
And part of their problem is that, you know, whoever they take is probably not going to get them past the 6.
So why not take the best player to draft?
Well, that is certainly one way to do it. But we should point, this is a much more organizational issue. The Lions, of course, owned by the Ford Motor Company. In the last 5 years, the price of that stock has been cut in half. And, of course, the team has 6 seasons of at least 10 straight losses. I'm just saying, it sort of all comes together. Now on ESPN.com, Scouts Inc. says, well, the Lions have made a major overhaul this offseason. Unless it translates into on-field success, players are going to have a tough time believing in Rod Marinelli. That's now on ESPN.